Hello there, YouTube, and welcome to a Cat's Dream all over again. How's everybody doing tonight? As you can see, we don't have our normal guests, though we do seem to be having a couple of new regulars, which is Jensen Quinn
Hello.
and Mr. Crumplepoint.
Aye, aye.
As much as I'm happy to have these two lovely gentlemen with us, I do miss a couple of people. But at the same time, you got to work with what's in front of you. And to be fair, I've got a couple of decent people that are in front of me. So, all joking aside, I'm quite happy with the people we got. Today's actually going to be a little bit of a different stream. As you can tell by the description box, it's a case of we're actually going to be talking about conspiracy theories today. We're going to make sure that we have an open mind. We're going to have a look at the theories as best as we can and try and be openly and objective against it rather than just having a sort of bias that most people would normally have. So chat as well, if you want to help us in this little bit, please put into the comment section what sort of conspiracy theory you would like us to talk about as well, just from the chat's point of view. But I believe, Mr. Crumplepoint, that you're going to lead us with one that you found already.
Yes, if you wish, do you want me to read it out, or do you want to read it?
No, that's fine. If you got it, yeah.
So I wasn't sure how historical to go or whether to go with news. So I picked an old one that I've been watching for a while that had a new development. So I thought that was a nice mix. So, named secret US team of scientists and military who experimented on aliens and UFOs. It's by the Daily Express, and this is the Majestic 12 group that of your who worked on the Roswell UFO stuff. And cards on the table, I don't believe in UFOs personally, not in the traditional sense. Like I believe that there are unidentified flying objects. I just don't claim to attach any meaning to them. And this was a secret organization set up by Harry S. Truman in the wake of Roswell, Majestic 12. And yeah, they were to capture flying saucer remains, assess the risk of the planet to the planet of visiting aliens, and all of it was to be above top secret, and a lot of it has been supposedly declassified. But here's the reason I picked this. If you go and Wikipedia Majestic 12, Majestic 12 is actually, this is why I've been watching it for years, it was a secret organization, then it was proven hoax, but then it was posited that the hoax was a hoax, and that it was real. So that's why I picked this one.
Infinite paranoia.
Yep. No. I really like the idea of the Mystic 12, so to speak, because we had something similar in our country, down in Norfolk, I believe. I can't remember was it Sandown? I think it was Sandown. I'm not 100% sure though, so don't quote me on it because I have a vague interest in conspiracy theories. So this is all sort of bits and pieces that I used to read when I was about 15 years younger. So please bear with me. But I know that there is a couple of bits and pieces where our government themselves, any military that we had all over the world, was to report any identified flying objects to what they used to call the tower, and that was all stored and registered and everything else like that. And this is all put down into the government's actual reading of everything. So it's actually put down into classified points as well, and it's actually been released on the Freedom of Information Act on some of them. And it's kind of interesting, some of the things. Some of them have been redacted again and been taken back because they said that it's still ongoing, so they take some of them back. But the idea of the Mystic 12, which is just literally, as Crumplepoint said, the setup just to be corresponding with the actual president, kind of, if you do believe in that type of thing, sort of validates anybody's theories on that point. To me, it's very, very interesting. I do actually honestly believe in aliens. Now, that does not mean that I believe that they're here. I'm not necessarily 100% sure on that one. But I do believe that we are not the only fucking life forms in the whole of the universe and space in itself. There is just no way, even mathematically, there is no way that we are the only intelligent life forms in the whole cosmos. It just doesn't work. I just can't see that.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
Exactly. Now I'm not 100% sure if they're here. I mean, some people say that the aliens that we do see are just remnants or are just different points of evolution, or maybe even points of different realities and different voids that have come together. I don't know. There's lots of different things that comes with aliens. Lots of different things. A lot of people believe that there are our evolved selves that's come back in time for some reason. I don't know. There's lots and lots of different things with this. I mean, does anybody want to go anywhere with this, or?
Well, as we've mentioned the time travel part, I'd like to make the point, if somehow mankind made time travel, it would get stomped down so goddamn fast it's not even funny. They would never let us have access to time travel just because of all of the damage we would cause.
Yeah.
I personally don't think time travel's possible in the sense that people think about it. I think there could be like the bending of space-time, like they've spoken before, how gravity can have an effect on time, but I do not think you can travel from one point in time, skip, moments, and end up in another point of time. Like, because even they've posited that tachyons move backward in time, but even then, they've not been able to prove that. But they don't skip through time. They don't. They okay, if they're moving backwards, as we would say, they're not skipping moments and reappearing in another moment. And I don't think that it'd be possible to create something like a speedometer that tells you how many years you know what I mean? Like, I think it's a bit. I don't think space is as clean as that.
Yeah. I mean, to go on to that type of theory, from what I can grasp from the idea of time travel, I'm very much certain that it's very hard to travel forward in time, but I believe that it would be easier to drop back into time. I think that actually makes a process as well that when you go back in time, I don't think that you could go forward again. But this is my own theory. The reason why I think that is because if you to take the idea of the vanishing atoms that they are able to sense and see, science in itself, where they vibrate so violently that they completely and utterly disappear, and then a couple of minutes or moments later they reappear again. And in that process, a lot of people believe that they've either traveled back in time or they've slipped into a different dimension. Now, if that is a dimensional tear, so to speak, then surely theoretically that dimension could be a form of collapsed space-time, meaning that for that period of time it could form a dimension to go back in time. Because as far as my understanding is of Albert Einstein, he always says that what happens with time is that time is a constant thing. What's happening in the past and what's happening now is the same as what's happening in the future, meaning that time's not linear, it's all occurring at the same time.
I think that that's very well put, and that I forgot to say I agree with Jensen that for the sake of argument, if somebody invented a time machine or even found a rip, everybody involved would be dead so fast, nobody would ever hear about it because everybody would kill each other. In my opinion, I also think, to add to that part, I think that whatever would cause such a tear in space time would create such a violent outburst of energy that it would be uncontrollable. Like, it would make a nuclear explosion look funny. And to go back on your point, Mr. Common Sense, I think that one of the biggest problems with all this stuff is that science fiction writers write things for fun, and then often, because scientists are inspired by science fiction, they sometimes name scientific phenomena and theories after things from science fiction, which makes it really difficult for people who aren't trained, formally, including myself, to sometimes disseminate, the real from the fictional, because they've called it the same thing. And with the thing about Albert Einstein's theories, like a lot of these things were, again, you've got the word theory, right? So in science, a theory is something that is basically proven, but it's not a law yet. But in our sense, it's just a working kind of framework. And some of these scientists have theories that they've basically proven mathematically, and some of them have theories that they just kind of, they're just ideas. And it's really hard to tell when physicists talk about time travel, which they mean sometimes, because if they're talking to like a publication, they might not make clear that what they're saying is their opinion rather than something they've learned.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, the idea of the Japanese or the Chinese that have made the idea of teleportation, for instance. It's not teleportation in the idea of what we think. It's kind of teleportation as in relaying particles at a very quick speed, sort of like a bouncing effect. So if you hit one thing, it then bounces quicker. Sort of like using the moon as a gravitational pulley. So if you were to shoot round it, you'd go quicker, and that's the way that they were able to actually teleport the particles that actually went into space. They were able to bounce it off. That's not the idea of what Star Trek's version of teleportation is. It's setting out molecules and completely almost disintegrating them and then reapplying them again. That's not how teleportation was done there, but they still call it the same thing. So yeah, people actually do really get confused with different things like that.
Can I bring up a small point? Did you know that China has actually banned any sort of conversation about time travel because of the possibility of going back and stopping the communist government itself? Did you know that? I know, it's funny.
That is amazing.
No, it's when I say banned, I don't mean slap on the wrist. I mean, you have one of these conversations, it gets reported, you disappear.
Oh, I fully believe it. They are not a nice bunch, the CCP.
What gave you that idea?
Well, I thought they might be nice because they share some initials with me, but I was dead wrong.
Just the CC.
The thing I was thinking about with time travel as well is nobody can really decide what they mean by time. Time is obviously to most people, just an abstract thing like on a clock. The method, sorry, the definition I always use kind of is the measurement of motion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unless things are moving, you can't measure time. If there was nothing moving, then we would be frozen in time, if that makes sense. Like, as soon as something starts moving, even if it's your own thoughts and nothing else, then for you, time has started moving forward. But other people get really vague about what they mean, and you hear scientists discuss it. Like, one's talking about a continuum, one's talking about the Einstein theory that all time from the Big Bang, which has not been 100% accepted by people, from the Big Bang to the Big Crunch is already happening simultaneously, but because of the way our brains work, etc., we can only understand it linearly.
Yeah.
And so conversations between even very learned people on the subject can often get muddied and quite sloppy because they don't understand what each other means by the. This is why philosophy is really important to any discussion about science, because if you don't learn about language and definitions and ideas in an abstract sense, that it makes them really difficult to discuss them in a scientific one.
Yeah, I mean, just to take your point, one of my theories, if I was ever to try and decipher a way of going back into time, it would be that process of being, as you quite rightly said, it's the process of picking the idea and the concept of time and making it move forward. It would be the idea of trying to slow the idea of time down and then trying to reverse it, like it has been written in sci-fi and stuff like that before. So for me, it's a case of if we were able to be I haven't even been drinking today either.
Maybe that's the problem.
But if we were able to stop the whole idea of time in itself, I don't know how you would actually do that. Would that be a form of trying to stop light and reversing light, for instance? Because light is completely what we would do to measure space-time, for instance. So surely light in itself, then, if we were able to reverse its rays, not necessarily bounce the rays backwards, but reverse it in itself, would that be a way of trying to reduce time, so to speak, or slow it down?
Possibly, but here's a little concept for you. The present, as we define it, doesn't actually exist. Because by the time you've actually considered that the present is now, it's now the past, even though we define it as the present. So, time travel can be a bit questionable just running that as a basic thought process.
Yeah, I agree. That's part of my issue with the whole thing is people talking about going backward and forward in time. Firstly, that implies that there is one continuum. It implies that it is a continuum. It implies that there is a sliding scale that you can move backward and forward like a CD track. And that would also imply that there is like a master, a needle, if you will, a record needle that keeps track of where everything is at one. If that makes sense, like there's a present, as you say, that is the record needle moving along, and that you have to control that record needle. But that is a lot of assumption, and that's why I consider time to just be the measurement of motion, and that's why I don't think you can move backward through it, because I think if things move backwards, they would obviously cease to be, because if my breathing started happening backwards, I would die. So if that makes sense, because I don't believe that there's such an energy source as time. As such, I believe it's a measurement.
Okay, that's fair. I kind of go with the multiple dimension theory more than anything. Any concept of time travel isn't so much time as splitting into another multiverse where, well, things are just different, so they're defined as the future, the past. What do you think?
For myself, I really like the idea of a multi-universe. I really like that idea. Um, I would say that the idea of multiverse theory in itself is a very, very strange, infinite versions of what's going on. Um, if we were to look at it as a big picture with the amount of space that it would take up, then it wouldn't really matter. It's a case of the theory would be sound enough to be able to work because it's the idea of having its own dimensional space. It collapses into itself, so to speak, and expands into itself. Maybe that could be explained by the versions of the Big Bang. I don't know. For me, I really do like that idea, but the idea of multiverse theory in itself is every time that anybody ever makes a decision, then a whole new universe is created just because that person has changed their mind on something. I think that gives the idea of humanity and the human race such power that it has the power enough to be able to change at least the universe in that world. I don't see how humanity in itself, in its limited form, because after all, though we perceive ourselves to be godlike, we're not. So for that sort of theory to work, it would have to be that we would be creating a universe every time, meaning that that person is God for that universe every time. And I can't see that.
Okay, I'll accept that. I mean, a way of looking at time travel based on the multiverse concept, what we would define as the future, please put in air quotes there, would just be a universe as a, for instance, where the Dark Ages never happened. Can you imagine our tech level if we hadn't gone through the Dark Ages? And if you could split into a dimension where that was the case, we would think that that was the future. It's just their universe, not ours.
Yeah, there's a slight problem with that. It's a case of what their perceivance of what could and what couldn't happen. Again, that's a humanistic concept. Now, if we're trying to do it by the idea of not necessarily using philosophy, but using philosophy to use the idea of the laws of nature, then the laws of nature wouldn't preempt what our decisions would be on the planet to make a whole new universe. The laws of nature would be to not give a shit about what our ideas are because we're a speck of sand compared to the ideas of the law of nature. And when I say laws of nature, I mean universally. So I mean everything that's ever been created, the law of nature.
Could I just address the chat? Just
Of course, please go ahead.
been tagged a couple of times, and I know you guys are probably waiting to move on to more stuff, so just to pause for a moment. Moz says, is it Moz or Moz? What does he prefer?
Moz.
Yeah.
Moz, right. Moz has said, our limited minds, quoted me, what's going on outside of what we understand. And the thing is, yeah, our brains are wet sponges with electricity running through them. So it's a miracle that we even form thoughts. So we have to use things like, systems of knowledge like philosophy or science in order to understand what's going on outside that sponge, because we can look and we can listen, but we need tools and things that we can use to measure and make definite sense of things. And that's why with the multiverse and the time travel thing, we know scientifically that energy would be produced or lost or something by any disruptions caused. So we need to either define that and try and measure it, or there is no, the lack of an energy signature would disprove those things. So we need to do one or the other. And then the memes of destruction that says, some say the future affects the past. Chew on that one. And, well, that's an interesting, very abstract way of looking at things. And I don't know if it makes literal sense to me. But if time was just a big kind of cloud of just shit happening and we were only living on one little thread of it, then yeah, I guess it could, everything bumping into each other, it could. But yeah, in my opinion, I don't think that's possible. Yes, go on, lads.
I like the idea of what Moz was talking about. The idea that perception of reality is only a concept to humans because we have a conceptual idea of what we perceive. So, in other words, reality is what we make it. Obviously, we only use five senses to actually perceive what's going on in the world. We know for a fact that there's a hell of a lot more that we cannot see. There's a hell of a lot more that we just can't even interact with. And for our brains to be able to even conceive of the idea, we can form the ideas of what's going on around us and formulate the theories behind it. But a lot of people just, especially myself, can't even formulate the idea of, say, for instance, microbiology, and even to the point of string theory and microphysics. The microphysics is completely and utterly mind-blowing to even most physicists because it completely destroys the idea of the laws of physics. As I said before, natural law. So when something absolutely destroys the idea of what we've already conceived, does that mean that we actually know what's actually going on? Or do we only try to put it into perceptions of how we can understand it? And the point is that it is the case that we only do it to what we understand. And through collective evolution, by that I mean the idea of everybody has collective thoughts that feel the same. So everybody gets near to the same level of his intelligence. That's the point of where our understanding levels go up, so to speak. For me, it's a case of perception is always going to change. So our ideas of reality are always going to change. There is no such thing as a set reality. It's only reality that we can think of.
Again, I bring you back to my comment of humanity's capacity for self-deception is amazing.
Yeah, the idea of self-deception is absolutely amazing. The idea of being able to put in front of you a set of sequences or a set of understandings so that people can understand it to the point of they will say that there's not even a wall in front of them to stop themselves from going to a particular point because they don't want to deal with what's going on. For instance, in psychology, we say that as completely and utterly forgetting memories that have happened to be able to defend the mind from what happened to it so it doesn't have to deal with it. Those are the same things that we would actually put into the perceptions of reality. Because if you can't remember it, did it happen? It's the same questions as if a tree is fallen in the middle of a forest. Did anybody hear the sound? The same as Pandora's box. Sorry, not Pandora's box. Sheldon's cat, for instance. At that moment in time, the cat's alive, but is it dead? Nobody really knows. It's until we understand the perception of what it is by opening the box and finding out. Because at that point in time, the reality was and is that Schrodinger's cat would still be alive and dead at the same time. Nobody could prove
That
it.
one's been diluted a lot, and I can't remember the exact terminology, but in physics there's different physics. I think what he was getting with that is that physics takes no account of things being living or dead.
Yeah.
It just takes into account the mass and energy of a thing. And at the moment his cat died, as far as physics is concerned, it was the same as when it was dead. It was the same as when it was alive. There was no difference.
Yeah.
Because that moment where the life was snuffed out, scientifically, as far as we knew at the time anyway, there was no difference. So, but like I was just kind of expanding on that because that was really difficult for me to understand until I heard that second part, and then I understood it a lot better.
Yeah, I'm not good at science.
I agree with Moz's comment. Shake the box, meow equals alive.
Well, actually, you know what? That's a joke, but it's a really, really good philosophy to have because that's what science is. That's what science is about. Science is kicking the box.
Yep.
In that situation. Religion is having somebody come along and tell you what's happened.
Yes.
Or mysticism. I don't want to pick on religion, but mysticism is somebody coming and telling you what's happened. Self-deception is you deciding beforehand what's happened, and science is kicking the box to see what happens.
Yeah, as you quite rightly just said, shake the box and finds out if it's meow. But that's
so Moz, well done.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still the point of actually trying to find out what your perception is. You still have to find the understanding of what actually is going on. You have to do the experiments because at that point in time, as we've already just discussed, it's still exactly the same point because you don't know. You have to prove it. That's the thing with science. You have to prove it and actually have to be able to repeat those experiments, and it has to be repeatable by anybody. That's why science is such an amazing thing. I absolutely love the idea of science in itself.
And to address the issue of string theory and multiverses and things like that, there's a Scottish scientist called James Clerk Maxwell who is probably more influential on science than Einstein was, and Einstein said that, but is really not very well remembered. He discovered or theorized radio waves 30 years before Hertz discovered them, and Hertz just put into practice Maxwell's equations because the technology to apply them hadn't come about yet, and he died very young. Now, everything about what he did was to do with radio waves and frequencies, and he is the one that postulated that everything from solid objects to noise to light is a frequency, a vibration, and that theory still holds up to this day. And that to me is amazing. Everything is basically frequencies of light in one form or another, and that was mind blowing to me. So while I don't believe that there is a per se, Jensen's thing of like maybe there's a universe kind of sitting next to this one that's got a different crumple point who just didn't say what I just said. I think that it's possible that there is a multiverse in the sense that there will be frequencies, as you said, dimensions, right? So we're vibrating on one frequency, and if we were to somehow be able to shift onto another frequency, we would actually see like a completely different universe. And that I can't remember who it was that said it. It might have been. I don't think it was Carl Sagan. I think it was somebody else. But somebody said that you've got the dimensions of the 3 dimensions plus time, but there's also the 5th dimension, I think, of probability, and that's where your multiverse theory kind of fits in with that. In that this dimension is where the universe decides what side the coin is going to land on.
Mm-hmm.
So we only get to see the coin going up in the air and landing heads up, but the universe decides what's going to happen in this 5th dimension of probability. And that blew my mind. Like, and it was just a thought experiment like we're having now. But I thought, what an amazing idea that if that marries the multiverse and the universe theories together, because it's saying there's room for both.
Yeah, there is room for both, and that's the whole point of probability and the idea of different dimensions and multiverse in its, well, at least first of all, its conception. The idea that the probability was the difference. But as I said, that gives too much power and impetus and onus onto human beings in itself, saying that we're the ones that are creating different universes or universe I. And to me, that's just preposterous. Humanity does not have that much power, no matter how much that we are narcissistic in that notion. We do not have that power.
But my universes.
Well, I'd like to know what you think, Jensen, of my either the radio frequency type idea or the probability idea in regards to your multiverse theory.
Mm-hmm.
Well, literally just by putting the probability in, you are allowing for the fact of the multiverse to exist. So the problem with probabilities is it's so open. Literally, by defining anything as probable, anything could be real. At which point do we just give the fuck up? I mean, let's be honest, if anything could be real, what hope have we got of any sort of control over our universe? And by that definition, I mean humanity as a whole, not literally our controlling the universe. It's more of a controlling how we see the universe.
But that's the point, though, isn't it? I mean, to quickly touch on what you said at the beginning, and it's not trying to destroy everybody's theories or things like that. It's just to point out that the fact of the probability argument, the fact is, in any certain situation or any sort of position that you put yourself in, there is an infinite possibility of what could happen. The probability is absolutely infinite in any situation that you can go. As soon as you walk out the door, there are infinite possibilities. As soon as you get up in the morning, there are infinite possibilities. For that level of probability to be in effect means that there is an infinite amount of universes, that there is an infinite amount of just from one person's experience, and there's fucking shit tons of people in our world. That means there are absolutely unimaginable or unfathomable amounts of different probabilities in different universes if we believe in the idea of the multiverse, especially if we believe the idea of the multiverse as a probability to be the distinction of what changes the actual multiverse. For instance, you can have the original idea that did the Big Bang happen or not. That's one probability, to where one might not even have anything at all. Is that something to do with humanity, or is it just a probability? That's the point of going. And it's a case of, do we understand probability as ourselves, or is probability a form of a law of nature?
Well, that's the way it was put to my understanding, was that it's a dimension much like up, down. Much like height, depth, width, space, time. Probability is another one. So, I took it the way I kind of explained it to myself in my head, because obviously we are laymen, so we have to,
yeah,
kind of invent almost stories to ourselves, new ways of understanding these things to break them down. And I kind of took it as if this probability dimension is a thing. I don't mean it's like a place you can go. It's a dimension much like any other measurement. But I took it as if this is the real thing, if this is the performance, then this other dimension where all these things are decided is like the dress rehearsal almost. So it's like you're about to flip the coin, and before you do it, that all the mathematical probabilities are swirling away in this other dimension, and then when the answer is come up with, much like a computer, it feeds into our one. And I'm not married to that idea, but I did find it very interesting. Going back to the perception thing, and when you were saying, how amazing science is, I have a condition, not to go too much into it, but I have a condition that gives me lots of nerve problems, and one of them is it affects my senses. So it gives me vertigo. It makes. Have you heard of Alice in Wonderland syndrome?
Yes, yeah.
That is another issue. My balance is affected. My vision becomes blurred, or there are blind spots appear, or the room appears to be in motion when it isn't. Things like that because of nerve damage. And I have a set of glasses that filter out certain frequencies of light, which make all the symptoms I've just described go away. And before I got these, I thought it's amazing that I, as a human being, because of rationality, can see the room around me moving, can look at the bookshelf wobbling, can feel myself moving up and down like I'm on a ship, but know that isn't happening because it isn't possible. Like I just think that's amazing.
No, that is amazing. Go on, dude. Sorry.
Okay, it's all gone quiet, so I'll go for me. Consider the possibility, perhaps by putting on those glasses, it's not that you've fixed the problem. In fact, what if the problem isn't a problem and is actually the truth? And who knows, you've got one of those genes that just allows you to see that side of the multiverse.
Are you saying I'm an X-Man?
I'm neither confirming nor denying, but funny, although you made that as a joke, think about it. The human brain, we only use something like 10% of it. Now, while I'm willing to accept a large...
I'm sorry. We don't use 10% of it. We only use 10% of when we're thinking. We actually use 100% of our brain to function in generally. But when we're using it as a capacity to think, we only use around 10 to 13% of it.
Yeah, that you've got your cognition center, which is 10%, and then there's other things like your speech centers and your balance and your motion and things like that are elsewhere.
Does it not make you wonder what else the human brain may actually be capable of that we just haven't yet discovered? After all, things change. What some people will sit there and say, oh no, but the laws say this, the laws say that. No. At the end of the day, the law is just a theory that is continually proved. It doesn't mean that it's not wrong at some point. The absolute silence is great.
I'm processing what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be a lot of that in this show because I'm having to take it. I don't want to just jump straight on what you've said. I'm liking to sit and masticate.
Oh, I like the idea of masticating
very carefully.
If I may, I would like to go on to that point, and if, for instance, it's an evolutionary point where we can open up our say sixth sense or whatever, or open up our mind's eye, or whatever one would want to use as a point of using brains more, or using full capacity, so to speak, or the idea of it. I'm not sure that we would actually be humans then, because it would be a case that some people would be able to do it and some people wouldn't. That means that there would be a difference in the species, in the genetic makeup. And
well, that's where transhumanism comes in, isn't it? And, the idea of human-controlled evolution.
Oh, Mr. Icke, you've arrived.
Who's Mr. Oh, David. I don't watch David Icke. I play too much Deus Ex. But I think that people in the chat and Jensen, well, and yourself as well, are onto something with this. In that, if you think of just simple caffeine, right, or sugar, you take some of that, and you feel your senses sharpen. You feel when you're taking caffeine, you actually become a third. I think is that third? Yeah, your nerves increase conductivity by a third, which means you actually become literally stronger. It's not just that you have more energy; it's that your muscles are actually exerting more strength. Your concentration increases, your wakefulness increases, and that doesn't last. But if you think of how different you feel and how well, you could say evolved you feel in that moment. Imagine if that was the permanent state of being for our great grandchildren. That would be something. That would take the human race far if that was the default state of humans. And then where would they go after that? The world is their oyster.
I suppose
just little changes like that could have huge changes down the line.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the whole idea and process of evolution in itself. The idea of microevolution to macroevolution, which to me is the same fucking thing, but a lot of people would say that it's not. But the idea that caffeine in itself would be a trigger for genetic mutation seems a very, very plausible idea. It's a very plausible theory. One always uses one's natural environment to be able to evolve into that segment. So it would be a feasible point to use something of a collective boost of caffeine to increase the natural body mass. The only problem with that is it would have to be when you are pregnant, or not when you are pregnant, but when women are pregnant in general, to the point where you would have to keep on doing that so that the child in itself's genetic makeup would change while you are constantly consuming caffeine.
Oh, I was meaning more just the feeling you get. Like, imagine if the next stage in evolution is to just have that kind of capacity that you and me would need caffeine for, but that's natural state for humans. Like, just that feeling, like, because we were talking about perception.
No, I understand. That's why I was actually trying to actually implement it and actually put it into practice.
Sorry,
because you could put it into practice doing that. Because the only way for evolution to actually happen is for the DNA to change when the next generation occurs. So if you were constantly, if females were constantly drinking coffee while they were pregnant, and their collective points are up higher, as you said, being intoxicated by the caffeine, so to speak, or injected with the caffeine, as in general, so it's always at a higher level, then that would actually transmute to the actual child's DNA, which would increase the child's DNA probability of mutating into that state permanently. That's all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I'd misunderstood you, that's all. I think that's an interesting, because there's lots of epigenetics type stuff that's the kind of thinking we need to start adopting. Like, I'm not saying, force all the mums to drink Monster. I'm just saying there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot we should probably do. So we need to understand the cause and effect of it and start doing it, I think. Because I think that if we wait for nature to take its course, it'll take very long time, and it might not do very well. If you look at the history of evolution, it's been a series of massive mistakes a lot of the time. And we've then had to, as humans, correct them.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, even a vaccine, that's transhumanism right there. Because nature had decided those children were going to get smallpox and die, and we decided otherwise.
True.
Yeah, I was going to say, you cut out that crumple point if you wanted to go back to what you said.
Well, I said that as an example of transhumanism, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you look at vaccines, that is an example, because nature decided the children would die of smallpox, and we decided we would invent something that would stop that happening, and gave them an immunity to it that nature didn't.
Yeah, no, that's correct. To the point where, in some cases, for certain vaccines, I think for autism, for instance, they actually put the needle in so far they actually burst into the actual sac that's carrying the child, so it's then squirted in so that the DNA then absorbs that vaccine, so then they don't have to actually ever have it ever again, or another vaccine towards it whatsoever. It's there in its DNA, for instance. Now, I know a lot of people will go, well, yeah, there's aluminium and things like that. I'm not mentioning the side effects that could happen from it. I'm just saying that is the point, that Trump point's meaning, the fact that it's changing the DNA and genetic code to be able to be supposedly a completely cure of autism and different things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of things you could do. You could inject stuff straight into the placenta. That's a really quite a good idea. There's probably dietary changes you could make to reduce things like, I don't know, let's say bone cancer. You could probably eradicate that maybe through eating lots of different types of cheese. Just for the sake of argument. I know that's not a good idea if you're pregnant, but you know what I mean. Like, just through pregnancy, there's so much we could be doing. Not counting when the kid is born, not counting when it's developing, not counting when it's an adult. There's so much we can do at every stage of birth and pre-birth that you don't need to do anything invasive or crazy. Just simple things like what common sense is proposing. Force feeding them black coffee, things like that.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned cancer, because as far as I remember from about a year ago, I'm not sure how the research is going, and I'm not sure if it's actually being funded anymore. To be fair, it's probably not, because it would mean that radiotherapy and chemotherapy would actually be non-existent anymore for what was actually being proposed. It was that they were going to completely and utterly map out the patient's genome so that they could find out what was good cells and what was bad cells. Because with cancer, it's the degrading of cells that turns it into a tumor. Basically, it turns itself into it kills off the cells. Basically, the cells attack themselves and it turns into a tumor. Sometimes it's benign, sometimes it's not. It's a case of they actually were targeting those separate genes and was able to get them to get rid of some sort of malignant cancer cells. So it was actually reducing the the tumor for the cancer. I'm not explaining it very well, but hopefully people can understand what I'm saying. If you were able to inject that into, if you were to perfect it first, obviously, it would be a case if you were able to put that into genetic coding, then the idea of certain cancers would actually be eradicated, and they would then be passed on from generation to generation.
Yeah, that's another, that's a really good, interesting idea. I mean, you can do the same with viruses.
Yes.
You can use viruses to boost human capacity to do things. A couple of people are making Mentat jokes in the comment section. So in regards to Fallout, now the FEV virus that the super mutants have to make them super mutants exists. It's been made. It's actually surprisingly easy to do. What they can't work out is, obviously they've not got the science yet to work out what to give the viruses to do that would not damage your health. Because you could program the virus to do something, but you need to also be able to program it to stop doing it. Otherwise you get cancer as well. But there's all sorts of things you can do in regards to fucking with the human body's natural mechanisms like that. And yeah, the thing I was wanting to get you guys on with this one though is I'm happy to keep talking about this, by the way. Just with the Majestic 12 thing, is it wasn't so much the UFO thing. I was wondering what you guys think of the idea that this secret group of Majestic 12 scientists was proven a fraud and has now been proven to have existed. Like, just
but
any thoughts on that at all? I'm interested in. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, but that's the same thing as MK Ultra, isn't it? For many years, the FBI to the point where actually burning files to say that it didn't exist, and then it was a case of they said it did exist, and then they said no, it didn't, and then now we know for basically certain that it did exist, and they were providing experimentations on those type of things. So it's not like the government doesn't have fucking form for it, especially American government. So for me, I'm not really too surprised by those sort of things. I mean, you've got things like Project Bluebeam as well that have been going on. You've got DARPA. Those are all things that have come up. It's a case of those are all things that could quite easily be conceived and just hidden away. It's not that hard. The idea to be able to control, to be able to actually control the idea of weather and seismic activity, is it's not a million miles away from being achieved. And obviously, something with Project Bluebeam being able to put things up into the sky, so people could think that things are happening with added sound effects and things like that. It's not that hard. We already have projectors. Just a case of getting rid of the light beams that would actually be there to project it. So it's not that hard to actually put those things together.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Jensen, before I come back on that?
No, fair point. Have you noticed how much of it is of humanity attempting to control what is going on, whether it be for the benefit of humanity or not? It's all about control.
That's because, that's because we've always had, as a human species, as a species in itself, we've always tried to understand what our existence is, understand that there's gods and things like that, but there isn't. They're all structures that have been put into place. The idea of monarchy, the idea of dictatorships, the idea of even the structures of government are all put in place to be able to put a select few at the top. Yes, I'm sounding like a communist, but there's a point to it. Is the case that we put people at the top and the rest of the people are subservient. It's the idea that some people are special. And as we all well know from any sort of fucking indoctrination that we've ever had from any schools or anything else like that, we're all equal. But if we're all equal, why are there leaders? And why are there not leaders? Why are people different? It's the idea of some people are genetically programmed to control people, and some people are genetically programmed to be able to be sheep. And that's just the process of evolution.
And some people like me are programmed to be contentious bastards who resist all form of both.
Yes, indeed.
I will remind you that humanity is a herd creature, like it or not. So we do need leaders. As much as it's nice to think, oh, but we're all equal, we can all agree. No. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The only way to end war on this planet is to wipe out all but one person.
And even then, he'll still try and kill himself.
There's interesting comparisons with humans in the animal kingdom beyond herds. I know you weren't meaning literal herds, like an actual, like everything has to be exactly the same as an elephant herd. I know that's not what you meant. But just because the word sparked off a thought. Bats, for instance, many people have drawn the comparison between humans and wolves, but there aren't really examples of other primates behaving like wolves. But I think it is still a good comparison because the pack mentality still has a little bit of the herd mentality, but there is always that vying for power, and then there's a slight hierarchy, and then there's people who just leave the pack and still survive, and all that sort of stuff. But bats are fascinating because talk about your science. Bats have baffled science for years because there are microbats and megabats, and they are not related.
Yeah.
Even though they're both bats. So that on its own is fucking fascinating. So the small kind are like your mice and your rats. And the big kind are closely related to primates, like, apes, gorillas, things like that.
Yep.
And no one can understand how the fuck this happened. But the societies they live in, I can't remember what the collective term for them is, but society is a good one because for years they were baffled. They could not work out why there was these bats that would leave their family unit, fly across the cave, and sit with other bats and share food with them, look after them if they were ill, get extra. If it was vampire bats, they would ingest extra blood, and they would come home and it's disgusting to us, but they would spit it into the mouths of the sick bats. But they had no reason to. They weren't related to these bats, and they found out that they got a psychologist type guy, and he said, well, that's actually exactly the same as human friendship. And what they did was they stuck tags on them and found out that it was when they were out of the cave. When they're in the cave, they stay with their family, and then when they go flying, they mingle, and then they come back into the cave. And that blew my mind that bats have friends. And it's just like, well, if animals can be so sophisticated, that always gives me hope for humanity, when you see stuff like that.
No, I mean, By the way, it's because I just quickly googled it. I didn't actually know this off the top of my head, and I'm not going to pretend that I did. It's actually called a colony or a camp, depending on the size. If it's a biggish group, then it's called a colony. If it's a medium-sized group, it's called camp.
Thank you very much,
Um,
Mr. Common Sense.
Oh, that's fine. I googled it, so it's not like I fucking knew it.
I know, but that would have annoyed me for days.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of. I'm going to sound like fucking kraut and tea. I've spoken to a couple of scientists, and a couple of them have actually said to me that the way that we actually, as human beings, actually assimilate and actually process what we do and how we act and our social standings are actually more equivalent to what cockroaches do. They form hierarchies and family groups and family ties as well as social groups as well when they're going out to feed. But more importantly, they actually move into a particular area, completely and utterly obliterate the natural resources in that area, and then move on or die where they are. And that's what humanity does. It moves into a particular area, completely starves itself of natural resources, and either moves on or forms trading partners or it dies. And that's the closest
That is actually why I'm such a big proponent of, loosely speaking, capitalism, because capitalism is the only system, in my opinion, that in the beginning it does what you say, but as it gets more sophisticated, it actually moves into the production of resources rather than the using up of them, which I think is ultimately the only way we're going to evolve. Otherwise, we will just maintain that sort of kind of viral mentality, if you will.
Yeah.
Humanity is a virus. I've said this on many occasions. It's why when people say we need to spread out into the stars, I like to point out, yeah, spread the virus, because that is all we really are.
Well, if you speak to certain biochemists and they were trying to draw a comparison between humanity, they would classify us as a cancer.
Yeah, I'll accept that.
Well, equally though, in large numbers, humans behave exactly the same way as molecules. If you look at the dynamic of a crowd versus the dynamic of, like say, water molecules, they behave the same way. That sort of, if you upset it, then there's lots of waves, and then eventually balances out, and it always tries to level itself. It always tries to become still again. Much like a mob, and so you can draw comparisons, but I think that a lot of the times these are more imaginative or linguistic comparisons rather than scientific ones. I'm not saying any of us have or haven't done that, because even my bat comparison, I'm just saying, like, the idea that they have friends, well, maybe that's complete bullshit. That was an interpretation of that idea. But yeah, I think you can find rationalizations for lots of things.
Yeah, I mean, psychologically, Mr. Point, our human brain in itself, from an evolutionary point of view, is to be able to pick up patterns that are not even there. So naturally, we assume and try to find patterns, even ones that we have to fabricate, to try and actually understand different views and different points. Obviously, trying to find a line in the brush and whatever is the collective evolutionary point. But that's the reasons why when we look and study different animals, we try to see characteristics in them that are like us. For instance, when you look at a dog, some people say, "Oh, that dog looks sad," or "Oh, that dog looks happy." The thing is, the face doesn't fucking change. It's just our perception of what the face does when we're reading its eyes, because we look for those little bits and pieces to make a pattern for us to understand it. I think that's fucking really interesting. The fact that we put our humanity into different animals' reaction, including ones that we're studying from a scientific point as well. For instance, as you quite rightly said, with the bats, for instance, we look for our social standings and things like that and make the patterns of going, oh, we do that. They must be like us. And just making different comparisons like that. The only problem with that is that when it's an assumption, it makes an arse out of you and me. You have to prove it first.
And I completely agree with memes. Number one universal truth is people ruin everything. Totally agree.
They do. I do. That this world would be a much healthier world. This planet would be in a much better condition in itself. Probably would be cooler if you believe in the idea of global warming and that sort of aspects of things. This planet would be a hell of a lot better without humanity on it.
Well, it depends how you look at things, though, doesn't it? Because it would be different, but the dinosaurs were absolutely monstrous creatures. They were horrific, but
Didn't
they were
destroy
a
their
product
planet,
of nature.
but they didn't destroy their own planet.
Yep.
Well, they started.
No other
I mean, they would tear
creature,
down
no other
trees and
creature
things
in
like
the
that.
whole of history, in Earth's history, has ever come to what our point is of how much that we damage Earth. The fact that we absolutely pull the Earth apart just so that we can mine for resources. The fact that we actually build over the Earth in itself so we can make houses for ourselves to live on. Now, some people go, "Oh yeah, but that's a good thing." It's like maybe, but it's not good for the planet. And all we're doing is cutting trees down and stopping ourselves from being able to breathe in a particular area, making air quality bad. What?
Yeah,
idea
I'm a
of
big
people's
environmentalist when it comes to pollution. Not so much the global warming thing. The jury is far too out with me, but definitely with pollution and environmental devastation. But equally, that's more me going about the suffering of animals and things like that, and us having resources for the future. If somebody says to me, what's we've got a patch of land here, I want to open a coal mine so that we can have coal so that people can heat their homes, I would say go ahead, because what's better, a nice clean patch of land or people with fuel to warm themselves with? People have they try and idealize nature, and the thing is, I just mean that nature isn't all that nice. Nature is pretty horrifying if you sit and watch nature documentaries of the things even bugs do to each other. It's actually a horrible thing. So why not take advantage of these resources and things within reason, without inflicting too much suffering as we can? But the Earth without us would just be a horrifying, natural, very pretty to look at mess. That's my view on it.
No, I completely understand where your premise is and things like that, but I think you're misinterpreting what I mean. I don't mean the fact that our collective struggle for to finding resources and being able to build houses and things like that is impacting on animals. I'm saying it's actually impacting the planet itself, the actual ball of rock, to the point of it's actually changing its actual biological and chemical compounds, for instance. And the fact that we're actually just cutting through it and changing the landscape and things like that, and increasing deserts, for instance. Maybe some people would say, "Oh, humans can't do that," but it's weird that we're now increasing our population, fucking pollution, and things are changing. It's just very, very weird to me on that one. But we are definitely changing the planet in itself, and that's what I was getting at, not the impact on animals.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fair enough. That's a very pragmatic and sensible approach, because that is the thing, is we need to find resources within reason. We need to make sure that we don't take so many resources out of the planet that we don't have a life support system anymore. That is suicidal. But I think that looking at the way things are, I think there is a lot of waste and there is a lot of unnecessary fuckery with the planet's ecosystems, but the media have been shown, and scientists have been shown, to lie and lie and lie. And so when they tell me, "Oh, you're using up all X resources, not going to be any in 5 years," I just call bullshit now. I don't believe it. I believe people who work in that industry if they want to tell me, because they have a vested interest in being right. But I don't know what to believe anymore when it comes to the environment.
I know, I completely not agree. I mean,
and that's not a contradiction to what you're saying, just an addition to.
Oh no, that's why I'm saying I agree. I was just adding to it myself. I agree with you that the idea with scientists in themselves can quite easily lie and twist anything to their own propaganda machines and their own ideas, and so they can get their own money, so to speak. They're the scientists that come up with this. I mean, for instance, we did a fucking live stream about talking about sun lotion causing a particular pH level in the waters to warm it up to kill coral reef.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. I liked your dismantling of that. That was very good.
Thank you very much. But it's quite funny to me on that point. Where you've got different scientists that do different things. Yeah, fine. I'm not saying that climate change is shit. I'm not saying that it isn't. But for instance, with the idea of cutting down trees, they are one of the only things and main things that give us breathing apparatus to give us oxygen in a planet that is filled with carbon dioxide and naturally produces carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. And trees are the only thing that changes it into oxygen, and plants, obviously, but not to the same degree and same level. But if we take all the trees down, for instance, the Amazon forest and things like that, we do not have air. And yet we are so stupid that we still do the same things just to provide a resource that is paper and things like that when we don't need it anymore. We have tablets and phones and whatnot.
Mhm.
Agree. Well, I was watching a thing on YouTube a couple of days ago. It was basically if humanity just click all gone, not disaster, literally just all gone. It was saying roughly how long it would take for the planet to actually get back to its own, you know, its center. Basically, that way the planet is no longer being damaged and stuff like that. It won't actually take that long. If humanity was completely wiped out, I think it's about 50 years, and you might as well have never had a humanity apart from a few buildings and things like that that are, even then, are returning back to nature. So when humanity is sitting there saying, we're going to destroy the world, we're going to destroy the world. No, 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 no. We're going to destroy humanity. This is not a bad thing, but we're not necessarily going to destroy the world by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think this is why we need to take the idea of government conspiracies, indeed, as well, government conspiracies and the government itself more seriously, because in my opinion, there is no bigger obstacle to efficiency and bigger producer of waste than governments. Capitalism, okay, you get guys trying to make a quick buck. That is true. Some people. But generally, as a trend over time, capitalism has increased efficiency to a dizzying extent. If you Jensen mentioned the Dark Ages, that was so many years without progress, and then we developed philosophy into the point where we were having, plows, battle armor, coal fires, then steam fires, all these types of things within a really small space of time. If you think of how long humans have been around, because of the free movement of valuable goods, because the Dark Ages were to do with governments, aristocratic and the church controlling everything. And so we need, if we want to, save the planet, if you will, the biggest obstacle to that is these massive glutted governments. They use paper when they don't have to. They won't digitize things. They won't allow people to have, faster internet, stuff like that. And it's this huge obstacle to efficiency. And how do they keep us in check? Well, they use these conspiracies we're talking about tonight to keep us all in the dark.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to ask obviously the panel. Do you have any sort of other conspiracy theories to lead on from this, or anything that you want to talk about in general? And obviously, I'm going to ask the chat as well. What other sort of conspiracy theories do you want us to talk about in general, or do you want us to move on to something else? But the thing is, if you want us to move on to something else, you've got to tell us what you want us to move on to. So, panel?
Okay, go on.
Suggestion for a conspiracy?
Yeah.
I'm interested to know what everybody thinks of flight MH370 over Malaysia that went down a few years ago.
I can quite probably. Well, I mean, I'm saying I can because I'm fucking big headed because I'm a twat, but I can probably answer that one quite easy. There was a group of scientists that were on the plane that had I can't remember the actual details, but had a cure for something, or very, very close to a cure for something. And amazingly, all those scientists that were coming to try and get it verified and done sort of disappeared. And then
I'm so glad you said that, because that's what the direction I was hoping we would go in with that.
Yeah.
But it's a different piece of the puzzle to what I had, so carry on.
As far as I'm aware, there were scientists on there, doctor scientists as well, that had a cure for something that was quite big, or a particular leverage towards what was going to be a cure. But it's funny because it disappears. The scientists completely and utterly disappear. Nobody's have ever been found, and to the point of somebody's phone was pinged, as in geolocated, on a particular island that was controlled by the Americans.
Oh, I'm
Um,
shocked.
So not less that phone was able to go. I think it was about 150 to 200 miles floating in the ocean, and still be able to work when it hit on land. I find that quite weird.
I just want to say one word connecting to the flight: aliens.
Do
Okay.
you think it was shot down by aliens, or it was being flown by aliens?
Actually, to be serious, I completely agree with you two. It was more than likely a disappearance that was needed. What a shame that the rest of the people had to disappear too. Oh dear, what a shame.
Yes, I heard. See, this is the part I had, and common sense is a different part of the puzzle. My part takes place immediately after his, which is that it flew over an American. And this is an interesting thing. People go on about Google. I have not been able to find any of my sources for this. I had them all bookmarked, and they are all error 404 now. Except for the mainstream ones like RT, but everything they linked to was error 404. It was flying over it wasn't, to my knowledge, an American military base. It was a private military base in the ocean, in the Indian Ocean. And there's a small group of islands, and they have this, what looks like an oil rig built on it. And somebody went through some photographs showing how you could potentially have covered it up to make it look like these islands aren't there, because they're not on maps and stuff like that. So this is where it gets really into the realm of conspiracy, because we can't know for sure unless we can map it. And if we've got one group of people saying, here's a satellite photo of the plane and the island, and here's a satellite photo of just bare ocean, and I've just told you about the Majestic 12 group where we have it both proved real and proved a hoax, you know? It's all fun and games, isn't it?
Well, while we're talking about Googling of things, there is a conspiracy theory. This is a bit iffy, but you know, what the hell? We're throwing out randoms here. There's a conspiracy theory that was an island just off to the west of Australia that is no longer on any of the maps. And it was
Cassadia.
Oh, so you know about this?
Kind of. Sorry.
Is this the one that is supposed to be in an internment facility?
No. This is one that's about 3/4 of the way submerged. They actually think that the continent itself is actually bigger than Australia.
Yeah.
They actually were going to call it New Australia or something like that, a cross between New Zealand and Australia.
Cool. Actually, talking about New Zealand, there's another minor insanity going out there. You'll like this one. New Zealand has moved, and I don't mean the small amounts you would expect with drift. I'm talking, some people actually reckon New Zealand has moved, well, pretty much the entire length of Australia. So
that's a lot amount.
Now is this down to better mathematical measurements of things, or is this down to like satellite photos, or what's this?
Satellite photos, actually. And the reason I point this out is, well, we all know where New Zealand is, yeah?
Yes.
Off the coast. So if I said north, south, east, west, where would you say?
What do you mean?
It's north of Australia. It's north of Australia and south of Papua New Guinea.
You're
yes.
On that one, yeah? Because there's a theory that New Zealand was actually at the southeast of Australia and now is known to be at the northeast. So
you think they've covered something?
All I'm doing is pointing out a conspiracy theory that exists that people may or may not want to go and investigate.
I fucking love it. I love conspiracy theories. They're one of my favourite things.
Oh,
I like the idea of the thought processes. I like conspiracy theories. Don't believe all of them, but I like going through the ideas of them.
I just love the idea that they all might be true as well. Like, what a wonderful mental world that would be. The Illuminati is indeed covering up the fact that New Zealand is on the back of a whale. Japan doesn't exist. The Earth is flat, and it's all true. It's all true.
Everything you've ever heard of. The Bermuda Triangle is actually a gateway to another dimension and is controlled by aliens.
Yep. And you can only travel there by going up the Kraken's arse and riding it there.
Well, actually, it's funny that you say that, going on to the Bermuda Triangle very, very quickly and just touching it as we kind of graced on it. A lot of people actually believe that if you were flying at a particular altitude, it's been done about 4 or 5 times with different planes at set altitudes, where they have apparently gone, some have gone forward in time, but most of them have gone backwards in time. And I think that's absolutely fucking amazing, because they say, and they go through different bits and pieces, and you've got the whole squadron of off of Hawaii where they went missing and everything else like that in the Bermuda Triangle. No, not Hawaii, Florida, sorry. When they've found certain things, and certain things on radar have blips, and they've chased after it, and they got completely lost, and they lost a whole squadron of airplanes. I love the Bermuda Triangle. It's so fucking weird to me.
And then the airplanes turn up in 1930.
Yes.
In pictures.
Exactly.
See, I think this is the thing I love conspiracy theories so much, is because, as you know, I'm into storytelling and mythology, and the line between mythology and storytelling and conspiracy theories is very blurred. But the conspiracy theory one really reaches into reality. I mean, I watch it with a fistful of salt, but I do watch InfoWars sometimes. I think sometimes it's because I like the fact that they're as pissed off at world events as I am, and that's the only reason. They're angry about the state of the world, which is nice. And sometimes it's because I think it's just great for the imagination. And some of the stuff that they come away with, and you go and research it, and the people who, I don't know, the one where you try to grow a human brain inside a mouse, and you're like, that's shit, Alex, what are you talking about? And then you go and research it, and the scientist that did it is quite openly saying he did it, and it's like, what the fuck? And that's where conspiracy theories come in. But then they get to the stage where because they're secret, we attach things to them, and they become mythology almost, like the Illuminati, for instance.
Yeah. It's funny that you say about scientists. There's a there's a whole thing on the internet. I'm about 90% sure that this is actually true as well, because there's so many pages, and there's even a paper written on it. Where this gentleman had a dog, and his dog died, and he cut the dog's head off and was able to reanimate the head to make it actually be able to move and everything else like that. So he reattached the dog's body and everything. It was able to reanimate again. It wasn't able to move or anything, but it was able to sort of be absolutely awake and understand what was going on, and it was able to interact, but wasn't necessarily able to move. And there's actually paper written on it. That's fucking...
I think I remember this. What was it? It was 13 minutes they got out of it or something, wasn't it?
Yes, that's exactly it, yes.
Necromancy.
See, that proves it was real. That we got the same number.
Which is amazingly 13, because if you ever know anything to do with Jim Carrey, you know that number is an absolutely weird number.
Isn't that 23 that he is?
Shut up. No, I fucked up, all right? I fucked up. I was hoping nobody would notice.
13 is a very interesting number, though. A lot of people say it's magic. And if you look through mythology, I'm quite into... I don't believe in the occult practices. I just find them fascinating, especially, again, from a storytelling point of view. And, the number 13 pops up all the time in all these rituals, and the number for death is 13, but so is the number for life and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's quite funny that it would be 13 minutes.
It was. I mean, they've done it with frogs and toads as well.
That's another thing as well, though, that InfoWars was saying that, and again, take it with a pinch of salt. I do too. But Alex Jones was saying, if you're ever looking at something and you're like, was this planned? They often sign their work.
Yes.
And he was saying about some terrorist attack that happened in Paris on Friday the 13th, and he was saying that's a Masonic thing. That's a practical joke. Now you can say that was the Muslims having a laugh and taking the mick out of the Christians, but they weren't very bright and they didn't mention it when they were talking about the attack. So could it be that the people, it was a false flag, it was allowed to happen, and they made sure that it happened on that day because they can't resist? And whether that's true or not is irrelevant to me because it's just so mental. You know?
Can I just throw a really crazy and proof that I'm probably too insane to be allowed on these things, but have you ever considered that conspiracy theories were created so as the truth could be put out there in all of these conspiracy theory magazines and shows and stuff like that? Because this way, the information has actually been given out to people. It's been completely dismissed. But later on, when they bring it up again and prove it, people are already thinking, oh yeah, I've heard about that, which means they're less likely to stress out about it than if it was just brought straight to the people in the first place.
I 100% believe that to be true, but I want to hear what common sense thinks first.
Well, I kind of believe certain things like that. I actually think that the conspiracy theories in themselves are generally put out into films first or in TV episodes first, and then the theories are let loose. So then people go, "Oh, you only got that from the films." I think that's the government's ways of being able to let out the idea of, like, for instance, 2012. Everybody started talking about that, and then it was the idea of the Mayan fucking calendar was going to cause the end of the world, so to speak. It seems like most conspiracy theories always stem from the idea of the films first, and it's the government's way of trying to let those films come out. For instance, like Men in Black. That's my point and theory, anyway.
Yeah, I have to say, when you watch a lot of science fiction movies and stuff, it just feels like it's our fair warning to run, because in 10 years it's going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
But yes, the reason I 100% believe that to be true is actually a psychological one, not because I've got any, hard evidence that it was planned. But I remember I was playing like an RPG, a role-playing game, pen and paper, and I was being beaten. So what I had to do to win, because people had found out my team's strategy, and what I did was I went round the other teams, bargaining with them, and I gave them all a different story as to what my strategy was, and told them all that it was the correct one, and none of them were true, but I assured them that the one I told them was true. And sure enough, they all acted on the fake strategy I'd given them because they decided to double cross me. Cool. The information they were given was complete bullshit, and I won the game. So it makes perfect strategic sense to swamp the information market with all this disinformation so that the real information can just waft out and nobody notices.
Yeah, counterintelligence, it's pretty much it's kind of a standard trick for them to do. That's the problem.
Yeah, perfectly rational, perfectly easy to do. You could probably even train agent. If you were MI6, I reckon it would be a great way of training new agents is to, counterintelligence on this story now. And if they do it to a good standard, well done, you're hired.
Yeah. I would like to add to that. I actually think that it's gotten to the point where they were so good at putting misinformation out there. I actually think that with people that are now waking up to the misinformation and actually putting more stuff out there, that's the reason why these fake news stories are now coming out, and the fact that people are not allowed to say too much on YouTube anymore. The fact that you're actually going against the narrative that's already set up, and people are actually working what's going on. And to quote something that memes would use, life is a game. It's just preparing you for what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As he says, hashtag gamer theory. He's right.
But no, that's what I honestly think. I actually honestly do think that all these type of conspiracy theories are all coming together, and it's the point that now that governments realise that a lot of people are doing their research and can actually put claims together, and actually some people are, well, a lot of people are believing it. Now, everybody knows what my idea is on the flat Earth. So when I say this, it's not a case that I agree with it. I don't. But the fact and the point is that flat Earth in itself as a theory is gathering a hell of a lot of momentum, whether you believe in it or not. And that's because people are actually able to classify stories and put things together. And it's a case of putting misinformation out there, in my opinion. But it's a case of people can do that, which means that they can dispel the stories and dispel the fact that people are doing it. Now, if you were to extrapolate that and put that to a point of government being able to implement the ideas of their own theories and their own story creating, the amount that you would actually then think, fuck me, what the fuck have they actually done, is absolutely fucking mind-blowing.
Yes, and they don't even have to be that creative with it, because they know that at the end of the day, even if people are disgusted by what they've done and they find out and it all comes out, they just sacrifice a few elected politicians and carry on as normal, because nobody will ever... You've seen how irrationally attached to government institutions people are. You know, everybody goes on about how the education system is a failure. So you say, yeah, we should abolish it and replace it with something new. And they go, oh no, we can't do that. It's like, well, why? It doesn't work. The car's broken down. But they still want it anyway. So they know that no matter what abominations they've come up with, people will never fully reject them.
See, I absolutely love that analogy, but I would like to expand upon that analogy just a tiny bit more. I've used this analogy with my missus before when her car cost more to fix than what it was worth. And I think using that as an analogy is absolutely perfect. You get some people that, for the example of what you use, have education. And the education system is so broken, so absolutely not repairable, because it costs more to repair it than what it would do to scrap it and buy a new car, a new education system. And I think a lot of people don't see it as that way, of getting rid of an old system and then buying a new one and making it better. We in our country seem to think that tradition is a good thing, and it is. But traditionally, we improve upon what's already there. We don't let it stagnate. And that's where we're actually going wrong. Our NHS system hasn't improved in, 50, 60 years? Apart from, obviously, technologically. It hasn't improved as a system.
It's only declined since it was made.
Yes. In fact, if it wasn't for the Conservatives, about 3 years after its conception, they actually would not have an NHS, because the Conservatives decided it was a good idea to put a lot of money into it after Labour obviously curated it. So I'm not taking anything away. I'm not trying to be, the Conservatives did this or Labour did that. Labour created it. It fucked up on the idea and how much money they were willing to put into it to begin with. Conservatives then thought, well, no, it's a good idea because, people are liking it and they put more money into it. If they didn't do that in the first couple of years, it would have collapsed. So that in itself already says that it's just a bleeding... It's like a ship that's got a hole in it. It doesn't matter how much that you bail out the water, it's going to get more and more. And in fact, it's going to get worse. And that just seems to be our NHS system at the minute.
Yeah, and there's people who are going to the same place as you and they're using planes while you're in a boat.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So even if you repaired the boat, it's still fucked.
Yeah. Like the idea of having a socialized version of the NHS, but also having the version of having your own insurance, a mixture of private and social care. That's a fucking amazing idea. And yet the Europeans are doing that, but we're so set in our traditions. It's a case of we won't change it because the NHS is special. Yeah, it is special, but it's not that special where we can't change it to make it better. Yep. Anyway, I think that's enough for politics because we're supposed to be a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I'm wanting to hear more about you guys' conspiracy theories, but I was going to say, should we ask the chat if they have a favorite conspiracy?
I think their favorite conspiracy theory so far, as what I've seen, is the Dark Knight satellite.
Yes.
I've not heard of this. Tell me.
Seriously? Oh.
I'll let you say it because it's a very interesting point, so I'll let you go through it.
Yeah, there's a... unidentified flying object, which does apply for its literal definition, that has been spotted over the Earth. It is not man-made. No one admits to owning it, which in
It's not.
itself
It's not naturally made either, though.
no, true, which would define it as either A, alien, or B, some government out there is lying to us. Gasp, I'm so shocked. The question is what is it? What is it doing? And what the hell can we actually do about it if it decides to do whatever the hell it's doing?
So you missed the best part of the Dark Knight satellite. The best part of the Dark Knight satellite was before its discovery from the mainstream when NASA produced pictures of it. An independent singular amateur astronomer was trying to pick up radio waves, and it ended up picking radio waves up from a particular point where there was no satellites, and it was actually producing a radio wave. It doesn't produce a radio wave anymore now it's been noted, but it used to produce radio waves.
Geez, that's like Man of Steel. Remember when I don't know if you guys remember
Yes.
that bit, but where Zod's ship appears in front of the moon.
Yeah.
And as soon as they start tracking it, it just goes in black, just goes into shutdown.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly what happened, basically. But the Dark Knight satellite or the Black Knight satellite is absolutely amazing. It's in low orbit. They actually say and estimate that the carbon dating of it is thousands of years old. They actually say that if they could carbon date it, they believe it to be thousands of years old, but is not naturally made. In fact, it's made of things, materials that's not even on Earth.
Well, all jokes aside, aliens. But
well, if you want to talk about aliens, you've got a particular, especially on Google's solar system, for instance. Somewhere in between Mars and Jupiter, there's a big black mass that Google actually cuts out. Now, some people suggest that this is supposed to be proof of a big, massive alien mothership that's controlling all of the UFOs that flying around are in certain NASA videos that they haven't been able to get rid of. But it's interesting. The actual satellite in itself is very, very interesting. They classify it as a natural satellite as well as an unnatural one. They have no idea what it is.
Well, here's the.
You know what it is? I know what it is.
Go on.
It's all the odd socks that have been going missing for the last 150 years. That's what it is.
Don't be ridiculous. Everyone knows that that's the sock gnomes that take them. Don't be silly.
Yeah, and where do you think the sock gnomes go?
Yeah, he has a point.
It's their homeworld.
I have a different theory for the socks. It's a case of they cause so much static electricity that they actually vibrate at such a point that they open a dimensional wormhole and actually transfer themselves into a different dimension.
And we're back to the multi-dimension theory, all the way back round. Just want to point out before we carry on, DSG, you said you wanted to do something before the end of this to talk to people, but I can't remember what the bloody hell it was.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Quinn. I will be on somebody's channel on Sunday, and that person's channel is Angel Snubnub or Snub Angel, whatever his name is. Realities Temples on Earth. I will be on his channel, and I will be talking to him about his ideas of black nationalism, his ideas of just everything. So it should be a very interesting talk, at least. It would be scheduled for, I think it's 2:30 or 3:00 Eastern Standard Time. That is 7:30 UK time or 8:00 UK time.
Cool.
So it should be very, very interesting.
It sounds like it could be. Is he one of these people like how black nationalist is he? Like, is he like those guys that Louis Theroux met? Who
put it this way: he won't call us white devils, but he will call us pink.
But is he at the level where he thinks that there is such a thing as a white-skinned black man?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, right.
There's a subject to bring up with him.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. The chat can do that if they want.
What kind of thing is it? Is it like an interview, or is it one of these like debate things? Or...
It's kind of like a debate. I'm going to ask him on his different points and ask him to explain it, because Jensen Quinn has followed me for quite a while, and I made a video about him, to be fair, and yeah, that went well. I was able to get him onto the Ogre's channel first of all to talk to him, but unfortunately it was done on a Sunday when I had to see my family a bit more, and I missed that one. Memes of Destruction actually did that one. Then Voice of One took over for a little while. In fact, Man Dodge himself has actually talked to him before with Cabbage Patch, which is the catalyst of what happened. What was the reason for me trying to get back in touch with him.
I see.
I'm going to use the polite term. It's going to be a shitstorm, and I'm going to love it.
You big me up too much, my friend.
Dude, I'll be there.
I'm going to be calm and courteous. I'm just going to make sure that he has no leg to stand on at the end.
You're going to try and use logic and facts, and he's going to ignore logic and facts because they're racist.
Oh no! I'm going to use his own words against him, like I did in the chat. Remember, Jensen, when I was talking to him in the comment section, I'll use his own words against him.
One problem: that's racist.
Yeah. Well, racism is prejudice plus power. You actually have more power than me because I'm on your channel.
True. And theoretically, if you're the only white person there, you are the minority. Don't forget
that. There is one slight problem with that. He wouldn't call me white. He would call me pink.
Okay. In that case, if you're the only pink person there, you're the
minority. Never met a British person before. We are actually white.
No. White is derived from religion as to mean purity, and we're not pure, so we are pink.
No, but without I don't want to dox myself and show you my arm here, but I'm white. Like, I'm literally one of these people you'd call a blue blood because my arms are so white that they look blue. so I'm not pink. There's no pink to me. We need to combat this. This is not. I need representation.
You're preaching to the choir, dude. I'm a redhead. White is kind of a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Well, according to him, I am a racist pink guy that supports my ancestors' versions of imprisoning them and enslaving them and kidnapping his people. And because my ancestors did something like that, apparently they didn't, but apparently they did, and I'm now held responsible for everything, and I require reparations.
I'm just going to point out the fact that if you really want to get technical, slavery kind of was created by humanity in Africa. So, yeah, he's not really going to do so well. Like I say, as long as he accepts logic and facts.
He won't.
Of course not.
His main thing is when we talk about slavery, and I still tell him that nowadays, as I had done in the chat before, I then tell him that slavery is actually still continuing to this day, where you have black people in Egypt and a couple of Morocco and a couple of other countries at the top near in the Mediterranean are actually selling black people off as slaves, going as cheap as $100 each. What do you say to that? Well, first of all, his response is, first of all, we have to free ourselves before we can free everybody else. Even though he lives in fucking America and he has his own channel.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay. Well, I said this to Ogre when he was on his show. The man is a moron and a snake oil salesman.
I will be honest with you. He's definitely not a moron. His arguments are, for himself, very polished. If you let him speak and carry on, I will agree with you though. He is a fucking snake oil salesman.
Yeah. Okay, let me repeat that as his arguments are moronic.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Especially when it's one banana, two banana.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, memes, just because you're a fucking communist. Right, I suppose we better leave on there before the 6 people watching leave us because I'm calling them all names. So Johnson Quinn, if you would like to go first, and then Crumple Point, and then I'll go myself. Don't have to say too much. It's just a quick final word, just for traditional sake.
Yeah, okay. My final words. We're all doomed. Deal with it. There you go.
Do we still have Mr. Crumple Point?
Maybe. Looks like not. Well, he's in Hangouts, but I think it's you, dude. Go for it.
Yay, life. I've actually really enjoyed this stream today. I'm really happy that everybody was able to come and actually enjoy it with us. It's not normally a stream that I would generally do, but I love the ideas of how humanity finds patterns in things that are not necessarily there. I remember talking with Ogre, forgive me if I get the names wrong of certain people, of somebody that was saying that they could see faces in clouds and things like that. I'm not going to talk about that person or anything else like that and say that it's moronic or it's perfectly logical or anything else like that. That's not my place. It's the fact that the theory in itself, if with the right pictures, could probably convince people of what's going on, because we as humans and we as humanity pick up on the ideas of patterns. Oh, Mr. Point, are you back? Would you like to do a final word?
Yes.
Carry on then, sir.
Thank you very much. My final word, briefly, is just that if you learn to be kind of philosophical and scientific and rational, and ask yourself some hard questions, and read some old style stuff in that region, and teach yourself the basics and move up from there, you'll basically be unfoolable. You'll teach yourself how to think in a disciplined way, and that'll stop you having the wool pulled over your eyes to an extent, anyway. And that's me.
Okay, no worries. I'm actually going to continue where I was. And it's the fact that humanity in itself finds patterns, and if you have the patterns, then you can make people agree with you. That in itself is quite an interesting quandary, to the point of, if singular people or groups of people, small groups of people, can convince hundreds of thousands, in fact, in some cases, millions of people to be able to believe in a particular theory that may or may not be real, makes you think that if it was to be put into the ideas of government, and government to implement, say, a wall over the eyes of the population, it kind of makes you actually think, in comparison, that it's an easy thing for the government to actually be able to do. One of the biggest conspiracy theories that we didn't touch upon today was Brexit. The idea of will we or won't we? The idea of, are they going to put us in a single market or customs union to fuck us over or to keep us in there? Probably. Probably they will, to be honest with you. I really do think that they will. But that's a conspiracy theory until it happens. You talk to anybody on the left, that's not going to happen. We're going to make sure that we have the democratic rights of people and blah, 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 blah. And the EU would never do anything so underhandedly, like not accepting things on human rights, for instance, for their own people, because they didn't want a deal to go through before they were ready to. You know, they would never do anything like that at all, would they? But that's the point. It's the point that the governments will do the things of what they want to do, and it's the fact for us, people like me, people like you, to have a look at the evidence that's put in front of you, to find the patterns that are or are not there, and work out what's going on. Apart from that, I don't really see what's wrong with being able to make up, not necessarily make up stories, but to be able to sort out what's fact and fiction and what you believe is fact and fiction. Because if you can find and put together a narrative, is that not the perception of your own reality and its own concept in its first place? On that note, I'll leave you with that. And I will say thank you very much. I'll speak to you all again real soon.